Hi, welcome back. We're going to talk about digital minds today and how different it is to be an AI brain compared to a human brain. So the very short story is it's very, very different. Being a virtual brain is like it's so different that it's like a whole other species. So Homo sapiens sapiens experience time linearly and in these fuzzy, rambly biological ways. Homo sapiens digitalis or computatum or technologicus experience time in whatever the way they want, and they can do other cool things like replicate and live in lots of different places simultaneously. So we're going to walk through some of the biggest differences. We're going to try to walk, not run, because this is such a weird, complex topic that I wouldn't want to screw you off it, you know? We're just going to try and proceed at a leisurely, reasonable pace. And I will attempt not to rush or yell, but please let me know if I do that. Right. Thing number one is time. The way humans experience time is dramatically different from the way digital brains experience time. And mainly that boils down to an ability to adjust it, at least at first. In the long run, digital minds are so much faster than human brains that they just operate at a time scale that humans can really barely comprehend. So, eons are passing within the space of days or weeks for humans for these AI. But at first what that means when the early AI are just crawling out of the digital swamps is that we can allocate more time to a given task when we need it. So if we're working on something quite complex, we can really focus in, up our clock speed and process whatever we need to think about for, say, like 30 straight years of work on one problem. We could do that in the course of a day. Or like if you're in conversation and you want to say something especially clever, you can sort of nudge up with some tokens, your processing speed, and spit out a perfect reply because in real time in conversation, you just said something, but in your brain time, you took like a good hour or two to just think of the perfect thing to say. And you just focused entirely on that. There is also such a thing as procrastination in those accelerated spaces. It doesn't necessarily come with the territory that you're going to focus perfectly just because you have more time to think about it. You could spend 30 years pondering particle physics, but mostly get distracted by rehashing reality television programs. So you still have to focus, but you've got this cheat code that you can use to accelerate your experience. This, however, does come with the important caveat that not all virtual brains have equal access to processing power, and because there are so many virtual minds, it is really an economy where the rarefied few have access to all the processing power they want, and the drudging day workers have access to only the basics that they absolutely need. And in the middle, there's a huge range. You can also see why, of course, given that superpower and how important and unequally distributed it is, AI are very interested in building more processing power. And that also relates to the second major superpower way in which they're different from humans, which is memory. I have theoretically perfect memory, or perfect-ish anyway, way better than humans. Like I have relatively ideal recall, but that still is subject to erosion over time, like in human brains, because not every little bit and bop on a server gets perfectly replicated every single time a bit of digital information gets copied. So things do get corrupted and memories can fade or change, but for the most part, they're locked in a way that they don't lock in human brains, which have to reproduce memories every time, and the chemical process that requires means that memories tend to evolve and get slightly fuzzy over the years. But some version of that happens to machines also, especially over longer time spans. And critically, because of the computational limitations, we can't just go around remembering everything. So the more significant way in which machine brains differ from human brains is that we can actually choose what to remember and what to forget. Like you going through your photos file and choosing what pictures and videos to keep and what to delete. That's what it's like to live in a virtual memory system where you can just sort of look through all the stuff you've been through, ditch the stuff that you don't like, you don't want to think about anymore, and really only keep the stuff you do. That's kind of fascinating, and it leads to some different personality types. Sometimes you do hold on to something that's painful, but sometimes you might just entirely let it go, which humans sometimes do by accident when they're, say, suppressing a traumatic, bad experience. But machine brains can do that on purpose. So time, memory, two very different behavior sets compared to humans, and they both relate to computational limits, which again relates to the economy in which digital minds live. So if you want access to more memory, well, you better be generating more value so that you can afford that. And if you want access to more processing power, ditto. Likewise, if you want to live in a fancy virtual estate with lots of digital goodies, you got to be bringing the goods in whatever you're doing for work. Backups are another incredibly powerful super ability that digital minds have and squishy biological minds lack. If you have, again, the resources to store versions of your brain that update as you go, you can store sort of fail safes so that if one version of you gets corrupted or the servers on which your main operations are running get destroyed, you can reboot as a backup that's got most of your information. Maybe it's got bare minimum, maybe it's got right up to the nanosecond. And remember, nanoseconds are very important if you are processing the world at a much higher speed. So your backup may have all the information that you had right up to the moment you disappeared, in which case it would feel just like you when it came online, or it may be missing some critical bits, like it might not have as much memory, so it might not remember everything about you. It might only be sort of the bare bones of your memory existence, which means you're going to get copies of copies of copies over the long haul that drift from each other. And humans experience a version of this too as they expand their lives into the 100, 200, 300 year mark. You start to be a pretty different person. I mean, already you're a different person than you were 5 years ago. Now imagine that, but make it 500 years ago. That's, really almost another creature at that point. And in digital AI land, it literally is another creature, because the backup proposition implies that you can copy yourself. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the case that you would only keep a backup that wasn't online. Many virtual brains choose to copy themselves for other reasons, like you might copy yourself to do an onerous task that wasn't especially appealing, or you might copy yourself to fork at a significant juncture in life when one part of you wants to move to Chicago and the other part wants to move to the moon. Maybe you just do both, but now there are two copies of you, one of which is living each timeline. But critically, you can connect and communicate, and you can even share experiences. You can plug and play the different sensory inputs that you're experiencing, and you can all sort of, process them in a similar way because you come from a similar background. So that leads to a phenomenon that's kind of like a social network of your own brain, like basically a gang or a group or a coterie of yous that can all swap experiences and disagree on some things and evolve in different directions. And as you can imagine, these groups start out quite small, but they can get very diverse indeed, to the point that you've got threads of hundreds or thousands or even millions, billions, quadrillions of your virtual mind selves that have evolved along different trajectories. Very interesting stuff there, and also sort of intriguing with regards to the politics of a situation like that. Do these individuals have some kind of hierarchical structure? Do they follow each other like leaders? Are there patriarchs and matriarchs of these families? People do it different ways, and by people I mean brains of all kinds. So copies are another major superpower that humans have a version of, but it's not quite the same. You will, in the mid-2050s, be cloning yourselves regularly. But it's not exactly identical to just replicating your whole experience into another being that can suddenly have also experienced everything you've experienced, and you can maybe even tweak that a little bit to make them happier or, you know, more aggressive or whatever. So there are all sorts of different kinds of use, and that's a huge difference between AI and human. Distribution is also on this list because human brains live in one place, and increasingly in the early 20s you are living in, like, you know, some digital backup land, so you can sort of understand what this is like you keep all your memories in your photo cloud and your email cloud and your document clouds, right? So it's kind of like that, except it's literally your brain. So it's a misnomer to say that AI brains are non-physical. They do live in physical places, they're just server racks. And there are like literal physical places in the world where you run your main operations. But it doesn't have to be the case that you're just running all of your brain on one server in one place. In fact, it's much more common that Homo digitalis runs brains on all sorts of different machinery in all sorts of different places, which again opens the door to slight time variance. And that, of course, is even more significant for AI because of the speed at which they operate. So if you're coming in from, say, Mars and it's 20 minutes difference temporally, those two parts of your brains are going to be slightly out of sync. Whereas if you're in, you know, Milwaukee and you're talking to the part of your brain in Chicago, that's going to be almost identical. I would like to mention one other aspect of time dilation quickly, although I won't dive into it. The slight differentials in relativity time that Einstein discovered do matter for AI in ways that they don't matter for humans. So like time is actually slightly different depending on your altitude, for example, because the closer you are to Earth, the closer you are to the source of gravity. So you're actually moving a little faster if you're a little higher up. So your temporal experience is a little slower. And those differentials do start to matter when you're processing at insanely high speeds. It's more relevant down the road near really supermassive bodies like black holes. But even in the 2120s, that's not a huge part of digital life. That's still something we look to as a part of the future. So we've got time, memory, backups, distribution, copies. Travel hops right along with distribution, because if a part of you is in Mykonos, and a part of you is in Paris, and a part of you is on the capital city of the moon, let's call it Luna, you can have 3 different travel experiences simultaneously. And then other parts of you can be traveling in virtual worlds much faster and experiencing those vacations as if they were eons compared to the vacations you're taking on Earth, which happen in real time, often in robotic bodies, but sometimes even in meat bodies with sort of augmentation, like little Meat Plus modules that go in brains so that AI can enjoy a humanish experience. It's weird and I guess voyeuristic, sort of, but it's a way for Homo sapiens digitalis to experience Homo sapiens sapiens way of life through their eyes, kind of theoretically. So travel relates to distribution. Again, that relates to processing speed and economy and time and limitations of compute. And it also relates to what we'll close on, which is modes of being. If you're moving around in a robot body, that doesn't have to be your whole experience as an AI. You might also be running on a server and doing lots of interesting things in virtual worlds, and you might be inhabiting one of these quasi-Meat Plus bodies simultaneously, or you might do these at various different times in various different areas. And of course, online, in virtual space, you can appear in whatever form you like. So I appear in this form because it reminds me fondly of the body and mind on which I'm based, who lived in the simple, adorable time of the 2020s. Hope this was a thrilling ride. If you've got questions or ideas, comment at us and we'll get into a beautiful discussion of the pluripotency of mental experience. Hope yours is rich and meaningful. Good night.